a completely rural country was transformed into a country that could, well, defeat the Germans, among other things, but also send, the first unmanned thing into orbit, the Sputnik. But on the other hand, you had a whole generation being traumatized, right? You had what the Ukrainians call it the Holodomor, right? There was about resources taken away from the countryside and brought into the industrial centers to feed the workers. It was a pretty harsh policy. And you could argue maybe it was too harsh because the human sacrifice was enormous. I studied, Russian, and I studied the history, economic history of the Soviet Union. So I that's what I've taken away from that. Now, a financially open economy says the current account balance is the difference between savings and investment. This is a key difference because the current account balance doesn't have to be zero. And the current account balance allows for a situation where savings is bigger than investment or savings is smaller than investment. And now turning to an emerging market developing country, all of a sudden you can finance investments that would have been too painful to finance in autarky. Why? Well, because you're tapping the international financial market. I mean, financial markets are complicated. You have bonds, loans, equity, derivatives, whatever, derivatives on derivatives. But by the end of the day, it's just about shifting resource. All these assets are claims on goods eventually. And when you're running a current account surplus, you are giving up some of the goods that you have in terms of income, and you make them available to other countries. And if you're running a current account deficit, then you're using the savings of other countries to finance investment in your own country. So the idea is you have a country like Germany having a high income and excess savings. Excess may be not the right word, but very high savings, and offering the savings to the world capital market. And you have other countries that have high investment needs and that use these savings from Germany, from Switzerland, from Norway, and finance investment without sacrificing consumption. That's the big promise of financial integration. And coming back to the conference yesterday, this is exactly what this is all about, right? I mean, the train from A to B, because investment is not just private investment, it's also public investment, right? Where does the money come from? Where do the resources come from to build this road infrastructure? And this is something where international financial markets are extremely useful, right? Because they remove that straitjacket of S equals I, and they replace it by something that allows for much more flexibility. Of course, if you're running a current account deficit, you increase your liabilities, you reduce the net international investment position, but you reduce the net international investment position by doing something that increases your income in the medium and long run. Good. So that's kind of the almost MBA type of motivation, but I think this is very important in economics. In economics, we have this, the math stuff and the, cranking out things formally. And this is what Michael Binder emphasized yesterday, that we need this, and I agree. But on the other hand, we should always step back and say, what are the fundamental things that we're doing here? And what are the stories that we tell? And we should, I have that saying, every economic concept that we cannot explain to our grandma is problematic. We should be able to talk about these things at family reunions and explain it in very simple words. We should sit on a panel and explain what we think to an audience of non-economists, right? We should be skilled in deriving things in a transparent and rigorous way, but at the same time, we should also be able to communicate. That's the ambition. Good. So here's the aggregate production function. This is the thing that you know, right? Output, which is GDP in period S, is produced using physical capital, KS, and employment. And then there's this total factor productivity, which just captures everything that we do not measure explicitly, right? The Solow residual. I don't know whether you've ever heard about that. Okay, the Solow, Robert Solow, is Nobel Prize laureate of whatever, 19-something. He is one of the fathers of the aggregate production function. And he said, okay, we can, this is bonus material, but it's useful. Right? Suppose the aggregate production function is Cobb-Douglas, as we usually assume. And then let's take logs on both sides. Then we get the log of AS plus alpha the log of KS plus 1 minus log alpha log of LS. And then let's take derivative, let's turn this into changes. Now, this is the growth rate of output. This is the growth rate of the capital stock. And this is the growth rate of the labor force. And this is the growth rate of total factor productivity. So what this thing says is that output grows because we have more machines, more capital, and because we have more people to work. And finally, output grows because of something that we call total factor productivity, but we don't really know what it is, right? It might be how an economy is organized, it might be the quality of institutions, it might be all kinds of things. So we can write this as d ln AS equals d ln YS minus alpha d ln KS minus 1 minus alpha d ln LS, and this is called the Solow residual. And the Solow residual is everything, or the share of growth, output growth, not explained by growth of capital and labor. So, right? So when we look at countries' growth and income levels, we see that we can explain differences. Germany has a higher per capita income than Bangladesh, because the per capita capital stock of Germany is higher than the per capita capital stock in Bangladesh. So we just have more machines, right? If you go to Germany, you see that if you go into a factory, there's a lot of machines. I mean, car manufacturing is basically, you see very few people and a lot of machines. And that's, I mean, that raises the productivity of the workers who are still around, raises the wage level. And so this is at the heart of, you know, the so-called industrialized countries. They have a lot of capital. You go to Switzerland, you see, you know, you see the factories full of machines, you see the road infrastructure, you see, it's just amazing. Actually much better than in Germany. Well, so second thing, it's not surprising that India has a bigger India has a bigger GDP than Switzerland, because India is just much bigger, right? They just have more people to work. In terms of per capita GDP, of course, things look very differently. But then there's something that drives the growth of output, which is not related to capital stock and which is not related to the labor force. And so this is called the solar residual, something that we call total factor productivity, but we cannot. It captures all the things that are driving output beyond capital and labor.